Last night, after finishing Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, I tweeted that unless something incredible happens, I'm pretty sure it's going to be my game of the year. That's a risky statement to make in September, especially in a year that's actually been pretty great for games. But I'll stand by it, because I haven't played a game in ages that's had me this drawn in and lost in its world. Maybe not since Spec Ops The Line. Which brings me to my first point. Fuck is with that name, guys? I mean, I know you were probably struggling to find a title for your grim exploration of mental illness in a dark fantasy world, but Hellblade? That's the best you could come up with? Just call the game Senua's Sacrifice. It's alliterative, it describes the plot, it grabs the attention, and best of all, doesn't sound like a Rob Liefeld character. The comparison to Spec Ops actually bears out quite well, because much like that game, Senua's Sacrifice pretends to be one thing, while actually being another. It also engages in a lot of the same sort of playing the player kind of tropes that Spec Ops was full of. I want to talk about some of the spoilerific things that happen in the game, but quite honestly, I feel it's best appreciated while avoiding spoilers as much as possible. So if you haven't played it, I'm going to spend the first half of this review kind of talking around the spoilers as much as possible, and then we'll get to the second half, and you can choose whether you want to keep watching, or go play it clean and then come back and watch this review. I recommend the second option, and not just because it drives up our view count. So, weirdly, the marketing of this game seems to have been emphasizing the combat a lot more than the game itself actually does. I mean, I understand why. It's easier to make this look exciting than this. But let's be fair, you're going to be spending a lot more time doing this. That's fine though, because the walking and the exploration in this game is absolutely wonderful. Ninja Theory have really gone all out in their environment design and storytelling on this front. Areas all feel distinctly different, while maintaining a consistent Land of the Dead aesthetic. The narrative is scattered throughout the game with quiet elegance, never once sitting down and providing exposition, instead letting you draw your own conclusions about what happened to bring Senua to this place, from the scattered fragments of memories that you find, and just the way that Senua reacts to her environments and the threats that surround her. Indeed, pretty much the only things in the game that do qualify as exposition are these retellings of Norse myths that don't so much explain the story as offer interesting parallels to what Senua is going through. Now at times the exploration borders on walking simulator levels, but this is actually quite elegantly averted by the presence of the voices in Senua's head. They are completely distinct from you and her, and provide really interesting meta-commentary on what's happening. At times they're allies, at times they're friends, sometimes they're antagonistic and cruel, but they are constantly there. Without them, these exploration sequences could easily have felt kind of dry and dull, but with them they kind of provide a really nice Greek chorus effect to what's going on. It basically serves the purpose of preventing these walking sections from just feeling like what you're wading through into getting to the next slice of combat. Speaking of combat, it's absolutely stellar, and is scattered just enough through the narrative to satisfy you while leaving you wanting more. It's your standard light attack, heavy attack, dodge, block, and parry sort of thing, but the weight and the fluidity of the fighting feels fantastic. There's more than a little of the Souls games in there, because of course there is, but it's far from that level of challenging, and I personally found the combat sequences to just be a delight. The way that the camera is used is a particular highlight to the combat, lending it a tense, paranoid feel, turning what is usually a fault in these sort of games, dealing with groups in a combat system that works optimally when pairing you against one opponent, into an asset by honing in on that tension, making it a key part of the experience, making you constantly aware that at any point something might be behind you. And it's at this point that I really should bring up that spoiler warning again, because I want to start talking about the story itself, and quite honestly, you really are best off experiencing it for yourself. Okay? Spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Senua's Sacrifice is a game about mental illness. It's about a lot more than that as well, touching on themes of grief, persecution, Norse myth, reality and illusion, magic, murder, and an assortment of other grim topics, but more than any of that, it really is about mental illness. Senua's disorder, which is never identified in the game, as people of her era would have had no frame of reference for it, appears to be something like paranoid schizophrenia. She's haunted by hallucinations of her past and her fears, and like I said earlier, is constant host to a cast of mental voices commenting on her actions. There's some ambiguity within the game as to whether or not Senua's journey is even real, or how much of it is or isn't real as she perceives it. But this isn't a game about overcoming mental illness. Senua never finds a way to cure her condition, to remove her trauma. Instead, it's about coming to terms with that illness. It's about accepting that you can be ill and still deserve to live, and to be loved, and to experience happiness. It's about accepting that your illness doesn't make you a bad person, and in fact it doesn't prevent you from being a hero. The narrative in this game is beautifully structured with layers of ambiguity and myth, Heroic archetypes called into question, and an ending that feels heartfelt and beautiful while being entirely open to interpretation as to what it means going forward. More interestingly is the way that it toys with the players themselves. Right from the start of the game, the player is acknowledged as a person separate from Senua herself, another presence in her head. It's interesting to note then that the voices almost constantly refer to Senua as her when describing her feelings or emotions, her experiences, but refer to you during action sequences when you have most direct control as a player over her. The game also does something that very few games I've seen have the balls to do. The game lies to you. Right at the start, you're told that dying too many times will result in all progress being lost and your save being deleted. This isn't true. The game wants to lend you the paranoia and tension that Senua is constantly living with, so it lies to you, and in doing so lends more power to basically every single death by having you wonder if this is the one where your save gets deleted. But it never actually happens. That's fucking brilliant. By having us fear for our save file, we share Senua's terror at what might happen if she fails. Each death doesn't just threaten her, they threaten us. So like I said, something absolutely incredible is going to have to happen for this not to be my game of the year. But I want to close out with this. Earlier I said that there was some ambiguity as to what was real and what wasn't. And I've heard at least some theories that essentially argue that none of the game actually happened, and it was all a prolonged hallucination in Senua's head that deals with her grief. I don't find that narratively satisfying. Real talk now. I've lived with mental illness for about 14 years. Nothing on the level of like what's depicted in this game, but something that does cause me problems. And more than anything, I think the key thing I liked about Senua is that yes, she is mentally ill, but yes, she is a warrior and a hero. She lives with her illness and doesn't let it prevent her from diving into the underworld to rescue her beloved. Because you can be sick and be a hero. And I think that's a goddamn important message, and I like that Senua scrolls it in 50-foot flaming letters. Epic fantasy quests are not just the purview of the muscle-bound paladin or the statuesque Amazon. They can be for mentally ill people trying to accomplish their goal in spite of their illness, because they truly believe that they can. And in truth, I'm probably more interested in those stories than the ones about the paladin and the Amazon. Definitely Game of the Year material. I'm Stewart Griffin from ReadyUp, and I recommend Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, but not its name.